Let's talk about boundaries, not as some abstract self-help buzzword, but as the quiet architecture of your self-respect. When people don't respect you, the first impulse is often to defend yourself, to make them understand your worth, to explain why their behavior is hurtful or wrong. And I get it. There's something inside us that believes if we just find the right words, the right argument, they'll suddenly wake up and treat us the way we deserve. But here's the uncomfortable truth. People rarely start respecting you because of what you tell them. They start respecting you because of what you show them you will and will not accept. Boundaries are not about building walls to keep people out. They're about building a framework that keeps your values intact. Think of them like the frame of a house. Without them, everything collapses. And yet, many of us treat our boundaries like suggestions, not rules. We draw the line in the sand, but when someone steps over it, we move the line back because we don't want to seem mean or difficult. We trade long-term respect for short-term comfort. But every time you let that line slide, you're silently teaching the other person that your limits are negotiable. The most common mistake people make with boundaries is waiting until they're angry to set them. By the time you speak up, your frustration is so high that it comes out as an explosion. And when you explode, the conversation becomes about your delivery, not their behavior. That's why the most effective boundaries are established calmly and consistently. Before you hit the boiling point, they're not emotional reactions, they're clear decisions. And here's where people get it wrong. They think setting boundaries means delivering a lecture. No. A boundary is not a monologue. It's not you trying to convince them you're right. It's a simple statement of fact followed by action. If you tell someone, I'm not comfortable with that, and they keep doing it, your next step isn't to explain yourself again. It's to act. Boundaries without consequences are just wishes. Now, I'm not talking about punishment. I'm talking about alignment. If someone continually disrespects you, your actions should align with the reality that you can't trust them to treat you well. That might mean limiting your contact, changing the way you engage with them, or in some cases, removing them from your life altogether. You're not doing it to hurt them, you're doing it to protect yourself. And that's the difference between reaction and resolution. Reaction is about them, resolution is about you. Psychologically, boundaries are powerful because they communicate self-worth without you ever having to say, I'm worthy. People pick up on how you treat yourself far more than they listen to what you tell them. If you're constantly bending, over-explaining, and letting things slide, you're not sending the message that you're easygoing. You're sending the message that you're easy to disregard. And human nature is what it is. People often treat you according to the lowest standard you're willing to tolerate. The philosophical side of this is fascinating because boundaries are essentially a moral stance. They say, this is how I believe human beings should treat one another, and I refuse to participate in anything less. That's not selfish, it's principled. It's saying that dignity isn't negotiable. And if someone views your dignity as an inconvenience, you've just learned something very important about who they are. Of course, setting boundaries doesn't guarantee everyone will respect them. Some people will push back harder because losing control over you threatens them. They'll call you selfish, cold, ungrateful, anything to guilt you into moving that line back again. And this is where the real test comes in. Are you willing to be misunderstood in order to be respected? Because the truth is, you can either chase approval or command respect, but you can't do both at the same time. One of the hardest parts of boundary setting is accepting that it will cost you certain relationships. Some people are only comfortable around you when you're pliable, when you put their comfort above your own. The moment you stop doing that, they might pull away. And as painful as that can be, it's actually a gift. It reveals which connections were based on genuine respect and which were built on your silence. The irony is, the people who truly value you will not be offended by your boundaries. They might not love every single one of them, but they will respect them because they respect you. They know that limits are a sign of self-awareness, not hostility. And in the long run, boundaries actually deepen relationships because they create clarity. Everyone knows where they stand. So, how do you do it without feeling like the bad guy? You detach your boundaries from emotion. You don't set them out of anger, you set them out of clarity. You speak plainly, you don't over-justify. And when the line is crossed, you respond with action, not another speech. You don't need them to agree that your boundary is valid. You only need to decide that it is. In the end, boundaries are not about controlling other people. They're about controlling the role you allow them to play in your life. They are a quiet but unshakable statement that says, I know my worth and I will protect it. And once you live that truth consistently, something remarkable happens. People either rise to meet your standard or they remove themselves. And either way, your life becomes lighter, calmer, and far more aligned with the respect you deserve. The only question left is, will you draw the line and hold it, or will you keep redrawing it until there's nothing left to protect? Because the moment you decide the answer, the way people treat you will start to change. Let's be honest, most of the pain we feel when someone disrespects us doesn't actually come from their behavior. It comes from the story we tell ourselves about what their behavior means. When someone rolls their eyes at you, interrupts you, dismisses your opinion, or talks down to you, the mind instantly starts translating. They think I'm not good enough. They think I'm weak. They think I don't matter. And before you know it, you're not just responding to their actions, you're fighting your own internal storm. The problem is, once you let their treatment define your worth, you've handed over control of your emotional state. You're letting them hold the remote to your mood. And here's the brutal truth. Some people will use that remote as often as they can, not because they're thinking about you all the time, but because they've learned it works. The more reactive you are, the easier you are to manipulate. Detachment is not about becoming cold or emotionless. It's not about pretending you don't care when you actually do. It's about separating their actions from your identity. Their disrespect says something about their values, their upbringing, their emotional maturity, not about yours. If someone throws mud at you, it doesn't mean you are made of mud. But if you pick it up, rub it on yourself, and carry it around all day, that's a choice. Psychologically, detachment is an act of self-preservation. It creates a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap, you get to choose your reaction. Without detachment, you're on autopilot. Someone disrespects you, and you instantly fire back, or you sulk, or you spiral into self-doubt. With detachment, you pause, you assess, you decide whether this is worth your energy, and very often, the answer is no. Think about it. If you needed every person you meet to like you, agree with you, and treat you well in order to feel secure, your life would be one long, exhausting chase. But the moment you realize you can stand solid even when others disapprove, you free yourself from that treadmill. You start living from your own center instead of bending to the shifting winds of other people's moods. Philosophically, detachment is rooted in the idea that you cannot control the minds of others, only your own. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. They taught that you don't suffer because of events themselves, but because of the interpretation you attach to them. When someone disrespects you, your mind wants to label it as an attack on your value. Detachment says, no, it's not about me. It's about them. And I get to decide how much real estate this takes up in my head. Now, here's where people misunderstand detachment. They think it means you stop standing up for yourself. Absolutely not. Detachment doesn't mean you ignore disrespect. It means you address it from a place of composure, not chaos. You can call someone out, you can walk away, you can enforce a boundary, but you do it without letting them pull you into emotional quicksand. It's the difference between a firefighter calmly putting out a blaze and someone panicking with a bucket of water, splashing more smoke than fire. Detachment also strips away the hooks that keep toxic dynamics alive. Disrespectful people thrive on reaction. It gives them a sense of control. The more you feed that loop, the more they repeat the behavior. But when you respond with calm clarity, when you don't bite at the bait, the dynamic shifts. They lose their grip because they're no longer getting what they came for. And let's be real. This takes practice. The first few times you try to detach, your emotions will still flare up. You'll feel the heat rise in your chest, the comeback forming in your mind. That's normal. Detachment is a muscle, and like any muscle, it strengthens with repetition. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you reinforce the idea that you, not them, are in charge of your emotional thermostat. There's also a deeper layer here. Detachment forces you to confront how much of your self-worth you've outsourced to other people's opinions. If you grew up believing you had to earn love, please everyone, or avoid conflict at all costs, disrespect will hit you like a punch to the gut. Detachment disrupts that programming. It says, I don't need your approval to feel whole. I don't need your validation to know my value. That's not arrogance. That's self-ownership. And sometimes detachment is about choosing silence, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you understand that not every battle is worth fighting. Silence can be louder than argument. Walking away can speak more than 1,000 perfectly crafted comebacks. When you no longer feel the need to win every point, you start winning the bigger game, the one where your peace is intact and your energy is preserved for the things that matter. The paradox of detachment is that it actually makes you more effective in dealing with disrespect. When you're not clouded by anger or insecurity, you see the situation more clearly. You spot patterns, you anticipate behavior, and you make decisions based on strategy instead of impulse. And that's when you stop being someone who merely reacts to disrespect and start becoming someone who commands respect without demanding it. So here's the takeaway. You can't stop people from being who they are, but you can stop letting who they are decide how you feel. You can choose to be anchored in your own worth, no matter how the waves around you crash. You can decide that their behavior is their burden, not your identity. And when you make that shift, when you truly detach from the need for their respect, you'll find that the people who matter will respect you even more, and the ones who don't will fade into the background where they belong. Because at the end of the day, the question isn't, how do I get them to respect me? The question is, how do I respect myself enough to not need their respect in order to be at peace? And once you have that answer, their opinion stops being a prison and your life starts being your own.